Hello, hello, hello. It's Tamika Williams of Love Inspire Teach E. Welcome to the LITE Firestarters podcast. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. It's that time again. So if it's your first time joining us, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, ring the notification bell, whatever works best for you. As far as making sure to tune in. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. So if you prefer one space over the other, you know, um, you got options. Um, so we actually restarted getting back into the podcast in April, touching on back to where we first started with relationships. Last week, I kind of talked more, I would say it was along the lines of health and wellness, just getting back into your foundations and whatnot. And today, it really seemed like the best spot to go was spirituality. Now, let me be upfront and honest and just say that spirituality is one of those topics that I don't tend to touch on as often because I just feel like everyone has their own ideas related to it. And a lot of people associate it with religion or they like to make the distinction between religion and spirituality being two separate things. Really and truly, the key is finding something that works best for you, that gives you this sense of identity, more or less, and really it honestly speaks back to what I was talking about with foundation last week. The cool thing about all the topics that we touch on, they're always going to be interrelated in some way. It's really cool that we can recognize these like broader scopes of things that impact us. And I'll be honest, I actually did take a course with one of she falls into like the motivational speaker categories, but I did take a course and related to just improving and getting some coaching, because that's something that I think is really fundamental. It will always help us. We always want to improve. And these were actually the 4 categories that we touched upon within that experience. And it was something that in other courses and other coaching programs, it's been along those lines. So there's, a theme and there's validity to having those kind of structures. But I do think either you're really in it or you're not. And the in-between people, I guess we're not really going to know that much about them, but they're out there. I find that, like, it's not something I talk about a lot with my friends. Like, it's, I've run into some at church, and that's where we've discovered, like, we share faith as far as religion goes. One of my friends let me know, like, they have different things going on, like sleep issues or, like their stress levels high. That's when I'll bring up spirituality. And to me, a lot of times I will associate it with meditation for me. So let me go ahead and put myself out there. I may not go to church every Sunday, but you will catch me. Like, I go through my fits and starts with it. And because I have kids, I want to set a good example for them. And then, if they're in different programs that are going on, then obviously, like, it is more important to be consistent. And I've fallen off on that a little bit. So I'm in one of those phases where it's a tough push. And my religion is one thing, but as far as my spirituality goes, like, I've had to find other avenues to really dig deeper within myself. And for me, it was really getting into meditation, or I don't know if I do think there's a distinction between meditation and mindfulness. Like, they're slightly different. But when it came to meditation, I always knew that concept to me sounded so incredibly difficult. The idea of just sitting still, sitting in it, sitting in the moment. And when it comes to spirituality, I feel like it's huge. It's key to the idea of spirituality and just being able to accept where you're at right now. So one of the books that I was actually gifted a while back from one of my best friends. They were by Eckhart Tolle. And if you guys follow Oprah's book club, he was on in that one of the authors within her recommendations. Now you guys know anyone who gets recommended by Oprah, like they shoot into fame, and I feel like they're just set for life whenever that happens. But when it comes to the concepts that he was talking about, the book that I always remember the name of easiest is The Power of Now. And it was a hard read for me because I don't do well with nonfiction books. Those are not really my thing. I like stories. I like things that let me dream and think of different ideas. And again, I think that's where the whole spirituality concept gets a little hard because you're focused on the here and now. You're not letting your mind wander and go to all these different places. And The Power of Now, it took me a while to get through it and finish it, but I did. But Eckhart Tolle really talks about how once he accepted the concept of living in the moment, it was like everything fell into place. A lot of times people will talk about alignment, and that's one of the things that he really pushes. So when it comes to spirituality, are you comfortable with yourself? Are you able to just sit in it? Not everyone can do that, you know? It's an exercise. And again, like I said, the whole concept with meditation, that idea of like getting started with it, I knew it was going to be hard. And I was not into meditating when I read Power of Now. I was not into, I think I was just in survival mode. If I really think hard about it, it was not long after I had my second child. I moved to a new city. I was on my own, and there was a lot going on, and I was powering through it. And it was just like, what can I really do to keep myself going? Like, I have these tools. I have this book that a friend gave me. I'm on my own. Why don't I get into this? So I wasn't even into meditation at that point. And getting into meditation, I don't think it was ever like this goal or something that I really felt a strong need for in my life. I already prayed. And I feel like when I do meditate, meditation is in some ways a form of prayer. It just isn't to like the name of the entity of whatever religion. Like you just kind of sitting in those things you can't see and touch. And so to really focus in on the idea that it's not going to be easy at first and it's going to be uncomfortable. A lot of times when I'll talk to my friends about it, I'll just ask them if they've ever tried it. And so many times I've heard people say, oh, I can't do it. It's too hard. I can't sit still for that long. I have too many thoughts. And for me, when I first started, it was like, all right, my goal needs to be small because I don't sit still well. I still don't sit still well, but I grew into doing this. So this idea of, you know, if I could do this for 30 seconds or 1 minute and just build from there and grow from there, I'll feel a sense of accomplishment. So that's where I let myself go when it came to that. And I still find it hard. Like I got to a point where I could do like 10, 20 minutes of meditation, right? I might even hit like the 30-minute point. But because I ended up changing my routine, I'm back at a point now where I feel like 5 to 7 minutes is difficult, but I give myself that grace because I do find that even when you are truncating that time, when you're doing a shorter amount of time, it still helps. It gives you a center to fall back on. It makes it so that you're not always thinking of the next list, the next thing that you need to do, whatever else is coming your way. It makes it so you're not thinking about what did I forget, what happened yesterday, or who do I need to get back to? And it doesn't have you thinking about, all right, there's so many things that are coming up. It just lets you breathe. So whether or not you do the meditation with the breathing or just with focusing your thoughts, it gives you a idea and a space and a structure to really lean into. So spirituality does not have to be meditation. I just want to talk about the whole point of bringing that up was like just giving yourself that room, that starting point to grow and sit in that. Then the other thing I would say too is like I mentioned too, I have a lot of people I know who are not that into religion or they don't go to church, but it doesn't mean they don't pray. So I think we intrinsically know that spirituality does not have to be associated with like a structure. A lot of times I feel it's important to recognize that religion just gives us a framework, and it also gives us a way to bond and connect and align with other people who are wanting to operate in the same framework. Because to me, it's also one of those things like, why do I have to start from scratch? Why do I have to rebuild something when someone's been practicing and doing this for a really long time? So why can't I, sit and pick and choose what works for me and grapple with how do I adapt the things that don't necessarily agree with me? So if you're not that type of person who's like into religion or the person who necessarily wants to go to church, but you pray, I feel like that indicates you have a strong sense of spirituality, right? And for those of us that have that, there are studies that show it helps you gain a stronger ability to adapt and a stronger ability to just recognize that some certain situations don't have to be labeled as good or bad. They just are. There's a lot of times where we're in a situation like I can't. I think part of why this was on me is because I know so many people that are like, I'm stressed, and I look at their situation and I'm like, I don't understand why you're stressed when you have a plan, you've implemented it, and it's just a matter of letting it run its course. And I'm not sitting here to say I'm judging. It's more because I also remind myself that I've been guilty of the same thing where I used to do that. I used to feel like everything has to be fixed or I've always got to have a plan. But then, and this is probably where this came in the most for me, is again, before I started doing meditation, before I read that book, I think, or maybe it was after, but I had my daily affirmations, and one of them is I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And I've shared this before. And that probably was a nice gateway into the concept of just letting things be, just sitting in it. Because honestly, we all know we can't change the past, right? We can analyze it. We can look at it. We can look at pictures. We can maybe even remember it a little differently after you process it, but you're really not going to change what took place, right? And then when it comes to the future, you can influence it, you can prepare yourself, but we all know we've all been in situations where you could have prepared for something and all that got blown away, right? Whether it's like I had a coworker, I think it was last week, he was like, I left for work a whole extra 30 minutes early and was still late. I think it took him like an hour and 45 to get in for whatever reason that day. It was weather related. And to me, it kind of speaks to those instances where people say, It may have taken you an hour and 45, but if you had been on time, what would have happened? Maybe you would have missed the call for your next big sale if you work in sales, or maybe you would have missed a sign for some service that you were really looking for and had been struggling to find it. Or maybe it would have been, there's those stories of the instances where people missed out on being in an accident. I guess I'm in Illinois, and in southern Illinois right now, there's been these huge dust up storms that on the highway, it's been causing these huge crashes. So you never know what's going to happen, but if you have faith in yourself and really take stock of, what is important to you and sit in that, let your spirit rest in that, sit in it, try to understand it, grasp it, take hold of it. It gives it more validity. It gives, I think, it kind of reaffirms to every part of your being that this is something you truly want. Another great book that a lot of people have heard about, they made a movie out of it, The Secret. It really touches on that as well. Like, what is the quote? Something along the lines of the whole universe is conspiring to help you. That might actually be from The Alchemist, or I don't think it was from The Four Agreements, but those are books that I truly enjoy. But with that being said, if you throw something out there, how people say, claim it or put that idea out there, they're saying you're setting yourself up, right, for this to happen. And the more you say it, the more likely it is to occur. And the same thing goes with writing things down. Now, what I find interesting about spirituality is, yes, people make up their own prayers or even write them down. But if you're really living in the moment, if you're really sitting in something, I feel like what's nice about spirituality is you don't have to do that. You can choose to do it. Definitely in my younger years, when I was a kid, I was one of those kids who kept a diary for a long time. And I feel like I might have shared this too. My mom actually got into my diary at some point, and just like that violation of trust, it made it harder for me to keep it up. And I did pick it back up and get into it again, but then there was something else that happened. And just learning about more things, and just, again, that concept of living in the moment is like, yeah, it's nice to have a record, but if it's something that I've processed and I moved on from, do I really need to keep it? I think the idea of maybe writing a book and sharing it may be helpful in that regards, but there's just different ways to approach that. But just generally speaking, sorry, I've got my little buddies begging for attention over here, so they distracted me, reminding me of their spirit and what they need, their playfulness. But there's just different ways to go about it. So if writing it down is helpful for your spirit, then do that. But give yourself that space to examine, what does spirituality mean to you? How do you see yourself giving room for it to grow? Or Lilia, come back here. Oh my goodness, they're gonna stress me out. I'm gonna need y'all to just bear with me a moment. I'm gonna have to cut this part out. Hold on, guys. Come back here, both of you. Lilia and Speaker. Come. Now. I don't even know why this is like that. Come here. I'm sorry. I have to, like I said, edit that out. Yeah, that moved my spirit because my little friends here, I think they're taking over in some ways. But to get us back on track, I just don't know how much time and space people give to the concept. Everyone's in a different place in their journey too. So, I mean, there are some people where they're like, yes, this is what I do. And I can probably build on that and tell you 15 more steps on what you could do. But I want to, get us into this discussion as more of a baseline, like how much thought have you given to it? And how do you define spirituality? Is anything I'm saying making sense or resonating with you? And do you want to build on that? And the whole name of the company, to just touch on that, I suppose since I go shorter, I need to remember to make sure to remind you guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, keep up with us. I definitely appreciate the love and support I've received in all these months of doing this. But when it comes to spirituality and why it's relevant, when you think about the LITE name, LITE stands for love, inspire, teach, E. And when people would ask me, because it started off as a blog, what is your blog about? What is the purpose behind it? It was really trying to give people a framework to help them push through some really difficult and hard times. And everybody has a story. Everybody has something they're going through. And if you overwhelm people with too much, it'll take away from their message. But like, if you just take one instance where, for me, I will definitely say I thought there's some things that I thought would not be topped by anything, right? But what I will say became a defining point for me was being in family court and being in it for years. And actually just got out of it, because technically if you have kids, you're really never done. Like, there's always your case number stays the same, and you just kind of can go in and out of it as needed, right? So there's a fluidity to it that I don't think people realize. They think it can be open and shut, and it's more like, if you end up having to go to court, you need this framework. But it was just a really stressful experience, and all the different factors and influences and ways that it shaped my life there were some times where I needed to lean on my friends. And there were times where I wouldn't lean on my friends, but I was hurting on my own. And I feel like I definitely still have a mental block on some of it. There's certain support groups, because at some point it was like, and I've mentioned this before, I do think therapy is helpful. But I felt like therapy was being held against me, and it truly was. There's documentation of that, and just violations of privacy in ways that the intention for working with someone else was tainted based on my experiences, right? But I still needed to give myself resources. So one of the things I did when, like, I was trying not to give them that opportunity and that ammo to try to ask for my records or try to get more information. And so a friend suggested joining like Facebook groups, support groups, through that way to still be able to have some outside perspective, maybe not necessarily from a professional, but from people who were going through it. Maybe they were talking to the professionals. And so there's certain groups where I have to like mentally prepare myself, or I have to remind myself I can only reply for so long, right? And so with that, it was just this ongoing experience that forced me to constantly redefine myself, find new ways to not lose hope, not lose faith, not lose that inner light within myself. And what was most important to me, to love on my kids. So even in a lot of the work I've done, self-work I've done, it's been about, do I love myself? Can I genuinely look in the mirror and say that? And I feel like sometimes sitting in your spirit you're forced to say, hey, you've been beaten up on yourself. So maybe you need to have that moment. And we're going over a little bit because I did get started a little later. But I really found that the more I went through, the more things that taught me, it was like, I can't let someone else go through this. And I've said this before, that the whole point of this is whether it helps one person, 5 people, 10 people. If you actually go to the website, you'll see what the actual goal number is of people to help. That makes it all worth it. And with the Firestarters podcast, I honestly, when it comes to topics like these, I don't think everyone's comfortable about talking about spirituality or talking about meditation. Or some people, like I said, even when it comes to religion, people just want to be like, whatever, that's not my thing. I'm not into it. But for those of us that are at that point, that are ready for that discussion, these are some starting points for you. Just remember that it doesn't have to be about religion. It can be as simple as you sitting with yourself and defining what you feel comfortable with for yourself. It can be prayer. It can be meditation. It can be mindfulness. But it's really being in the moment, being present, not having to always constantly analyze what happened before and what's going to happen next. It's just letting, for instance, with me, just letting myself sit here with the podcast, not thinking about my puppies, not thinking about, my kids, not thinking about court, but being here in this moment. I have to say the podcast itself, like, let me be forthright. There are days where it's like, oh, the timing of this, like having to change the time, push it. I push it back because the podcast used to be at 6:00. Man, these days, I don't think it had gotten so hard. I really couldn't do it. So now, even this time slot, when I rush and may have a harder time doing it, I feel like I probably set myself up for it. But I have to tell myself, like, I'm excited. This is what I wanted to do. This is in this moment. This was my pivot since I wasn't getting the blogging articles out as consistently. What kind of things need to be talked about? What kind of things are people shying away from? And let's face it, this, like pandemic conversations have shifted a little bit. It's not as top of mind. It's not as shocking. It's not as prevalent. But we all recognize that the pandemic has impacted us. And I think when we were in the thick of it, people were more willing and open to acknowledge and say, hey, we need more help when it comes to just getting our minds right. But I think we're moving away from that. There is a shift. There are people who are still saying, hey, I realize I need this. But when I see us, the efforts, like, for instance, when it comes to the hybrid model and employers wanting people to come back to the office and all the rationale why, and there's people who make the argument of, well, it's because certain managers, they don't know how to manage without being micromanagers or being over you. And it begs the question of, well, if the work is getting done and there's still productivity and maybe even productivity is grown, why do we feel this need to push back into this space? It's because it's what we know. And some people make the argument it has more to do with the fact that these are long-term leases that corporations can't get out of, and they're empty buildings. And the fact of the matter is, like, if it's a long-term lease and you're in it, it may be time to rethink, not necessarily having to have people come back, but consistently. But how else can those spaces be used for still relevant work events? But there's a lot more opportunity for training, development, or even, there's just a lot of different ways we can approach different things. So I think it's always that push and pull between what we know, what we're used to, and how do we redefine. And without giving yourself some space and clarity moments, which you'll find in sitting in your spirituality, it's only going to be harder and not necessarily happen. So that's where I wanted to take that. I hope you can find some nuggets and gems in that and appreciate it. I'd love to see the comments. So let me know what you think. And as always, thank you so much for supporting Love Inspire Teach E. Check out the website. There's some great articles on there. There's the idea to get back to getting some more of those articles out there. But, you know, this format and just the video and filming and pictures, it's just it seems to be the way that works for most people now. So I hope you guys have a great night. That's all I have for y'all today. And I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for the Firestarters podcast. And it's actually time to return to finances. I'll be honest with you. I'm really reluctant to get into that one as a person whose taxes always get the filing extension. So I'm just gonna throw that one out there. Who all can relate? I need to have Drew come back and take on over. But regardless, thanks again. You guys have a great night. This is Tamika Williams of Love Inspire Teach E, and I hope to see you next week.